Throughout history, humans have considered progress as a path towards a better life through self-benefit. While progress can loosely be defined as advancement or development toward a better, more complete, or a more modern state, it often came at the expense of another's well-being. The Enlightenment can be referred to as an age of logic and reason where philosophers would question all aspects of our world at many different angles. Its origins manifest in the Renaissance during the 15th century, when the idea of humanism was able to circulate among scholars and upper-class to middle-class men. Renaissance humanism was a revival of moral philosophy from Greco-Roman culture and was centered around the belief of profound human ability. But this philosophy only caught wind among the upper class. The age of absolutism saw a restriction of human rights not only in the lower classes but also among the nobles throughout the 18th century. During this, monarchs tried to acquire absolute rule over their kingdoms and did this by reducing the power of the nobles, which often caused the nobles to act more harshly towards the lower class. The Age of Enlightenment was a result of this as the middle class rose in population and power within their societies, as education was more available. During this time, philosophers became more influential and found support among the middle class as their logic and reason contributed to ideas that mostly benefited the middle class. Some monarchs even made the switch to despotism, as a way to embrace, I say that loosely, the Enlightenment. It invoked change within Europe and its colonies as they shifted towards republican ideas in order to allow change within their society that represented the needs of those who were governed and not those who govern. Capital P progress can be defined as the overall positive development and improvement of all societies where all the pros must outweigh the cons. During the Enlightenment, the ideas presented by philosophers would mostly be considered capital P progress, as they largely advocated for principles that are considered dignified, as these ideas had good intentions in their framework, such as advocating for personal freedoms and republican traditions. However, they had some complications when being implemented by despotic monarchs. Their main errors were that they focused their efforts among the middle class and not the lower class, and that their intentions were of self-benefit more than progress. Most of the ideas presented by philosophers during the Enlightenment had overall good intentions, as their aim was to advocate for a better life through advancements in individual freedoms. They often wanted to stray away from the barriers placed by religion and build upon human rights and ability. Immanuel Kant expresses this in one of his works called What is Enlightenment, as he states,
I have emphasized the main point of the Enlightenment, man's emergence from his self-imposed non-age, primarily in religious matters. Above all, non-age in religion is not only the most harmful but the most dishonorable.
He struggled to see how religion would confirm grounds for injustice within kingdoms and believed that its overt expression within the daily lives of Europeans was harmful. He was an advocate for a secular society in which justice and freedom were not determined by religion but by reason, and by this he aimed to encourage a better society, and with that he had good intentions. Philosophers also questioned the legitimacy of monarchies, as most monarchs would seize the human rights of those below them. Absolutist monarchs would claim absolute rule over their people by gaining power over the government and ultimately infringing upon the rights of those. Denis Diderot expresses in his song Les
En Toulon a foolish race forfeiting gaieties innumerable, rights, as blackened my thought. Objects of hatred and contempt, tyrants, stay away.
In this, he recognizes that the tyranny of the government at the time has stripped him of what he believes to be his human rights. His message is the epitome of what the Enlightenment is about, as he bashes authority and advocates for an empire in which people are truly free of oppression. Philosophers of the Enlightenment created the idea of unalienable rights that all humans should have, and urged the public to support the ideas as they were in their best interest. During the Enlightenment, philosophers not only wanted social change, but also stressed for governmental change. They believed that the people who were being governed should have some influence over what they were being enforced to do. This can be seen in the works of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who advocated for republican traditions in the substance of what he called a social contract. He expresses the ideas in Social Contract by stating that
Duty and interest to equally requires two contracting party to aid each other mutually. The individual people should be motivated from their double role as individuals and members of the body, to combine all the advantage which mutual aid offers them.
This social contract requests the cooperation of those who agree, where they must give up some of their freedoms, such as paying taxes, in order to contribute to the betterment of the state. In return, the government would provide protection of their rights as well as a representation within the government. These republican traditions that he advocated for had the intention of enhancing the political system in favor of the people who it governed. Another republican tradition that enlightened philosophers supported was the idea of separation of powers within a republican government. Baron de Montesquieu coined this term in The Spirit of Laws, where he states that
In every government there are three sorts of power. The legislative, the executive, in respect to things depend on the law of a nation, and the judicial, in regard to things that depend on the civil law.
the separation of government powers would inhibit political corruption, as each branch would not be able to overstep its bounds. This would help to protect the people from being scammed by their own government and ensure that their republican traditions would be upheld. Montesquieu was trying to push for an idea that would free people from political corruption and underrepresentation. Philosophers during the Enlightenment advocated for ideals that ultimately would improve the lives of the non-upper class majority. The ideas presented by the Enlightenment encouraged the advancement of freedom for all in the name of capital P progress. However, the poor implementation of these ideas by absolute and despotic monarchs strayed away from capital P progress while maintaining that identity. The middle class assumed power and had the most influence over the government. This allowed them to achieve freedoms for themselves, but mostly left the lower class out in the dust. Frederick the Great was a despotic ruler who in many ways embraced the Enlightenment as he increased support for education, sanitation, and improvements in infrastructure. Brandenburg was thriving under his rule, and he was very popular within the middle class as all of his enlightened policies benefited them and them only. Frederick himself stated in his essay on the forms of government,
A sovereign must possess an exact and detailed knowledge of the strong and of the weak points of his country. He must be thoroughly acquainted with its resources, the character of the people, and the national commerce.
He analyzed the state of his country and found that his best action was to please the middle class, as his main intent was to maintain his power by pleasing the loud majority. Capital P progress was made, but only for the middle class, as the lower class's influence remained stagnant. Another example of this can be seen in Austria under the despotic rule of Joseph II, as he pushed for personal freedoms and a government that could be considered more friendly to its subjects. Joseph II accomplished a lot during his short 10-year reign, as he implemented as many enlightened ideas as possible until his death in 1790. He accomplished these things under the identity of capital P progress, but were often implemented as a way to benefit Joseph himself. He stated in his proclamation of religious toleration that,
In order to make the dues more useful, the discrimination hitherto observed in relation to their clothing is abolished in its entirety. Consequently, the obligation for the men to wear submarine yellow armbands and the women to wear submarine yellow ribbons is abolished. If they behave quietly and decently, then no one has the right to dictate to them on matters of dress.
the aim of this proclamation was not to enforce religious tolerations for Jews, but to increase their effectiveness within society. The only thing that Joseph would gain from this proclamation was a more efficient economy, as the Jewish population would be mobilized into the workforce. Despotic rulers often use the idea of capital P progress to implement ideas with greater intentions other than improving the lives of their subjects. In conclusion, the Enlightenment invoked change that would forever better the lives of those who saw its efforts, thanks to the philosophers who justified and spread their ideas around Europe. These philosophers had good intentions within their work, however the adaptation to the real world proved to be difficult and did not reach the extent to which was expected.